sitting here today and thinking about the plans we had for 25 years ago, just quickly, the whole seed was planted with a young man from Canada. And he was attempting to go across Canada to raise $1 for every Canadian. And I believe he was 21 years old. What he did, he got about halfway across, about 1,000 miles from where he started dipping his foot in the Atlantic and hoping to get to the Pacific. We ran into him in the upper part of Canada, north of Toronto, when my family and I, Elaine and Laurel and Rick and Diane and Donna, were going to Elaine's home in North Dakota. We saw him, and I never forgot this. And that happened in 1980. Then, of course, we, in the raising of Laurel, it wasn't just Elaine and I, it was a family affair. It was a community. It was a neighborhood. And when I retired in '95, I thought I wanted to do something that would help to bring more awareness to people with disabilities, mental and physical. And that is where Laurel Run came from. I wanted to do something. I wasn't about to run across the United States. You'll see that I had enough problems getting across New York, but it was a plan that after 2 years from being retired, we started, and that's why I'm here today. Day one, I was up at 5:15, which was Monday, the 25th of August. We started at the New York-Pennsylvania line. We had Steve Watterson, Patsy, and Marie, who was the president, and Paul Sassana was there. And he had one of his family members from Italy, Luigi, who was there also to start off with me. We started at 7 o'clock, and I had two of my young men from the track team, Ryan and Eric Long, who were running with me. We started out, and they ran the first mile and a half with me, and then I was left to continue on my own. Along the way, a television crew from Erie stopped by, interviewed me. Also, Channel 7 from Buffalo did. And there were a couple of cars that stopped by of people that had heard about it. So they dropped off some checks, and that was kind of neat on getting started. We went that day as far, I believe, as the park outside of Brockton there on Lake Erie State Park, I believe. And that's where we finished that day. My wife stopped along the way and would be 4 or 5 miles ahead with water and so forth. But that ended day one. On Tuesday, I started again at 5:20 in the morning, and I was on Route 5, leaving from the park area. I had a coach and teacher, Judy Mowry, who joined me about a mile after I started, and she ran with me almost all the way to the TRC headquarters there in Dunkirk, and we were there about 8:15. I continued on towards Silver Creek, and Elaine stopped with water along the way, and we continued, and we completed the run into Silver Creek. I remember the day was beautiful. It was hot and it was humid, but that was day two. On day three, I got up about 7. We started out from Silver Creek, And we started off to Collins, running along Route 39 after we had gone through the Indian reservation, and we ended up in Collins Center on that day. That was again another day I was beginning to feel twinges in my leg as such, and something didn't seem correct. But it was a beautiful day. On the fourth day, when I was running, I started out from Collins Center, and shortly after leaving there, I was met by the cross-country coach from Gowanda, Denny Kraus, and he ran with me about 2-3 miles, and then we were hitting some hills, and Denny dropped off. But he was a good friend and very hospitable. And speaking of that, Springville, I left Collins Center at 6, and I reached that point, I believe it was about 8:30. And Elaine was waiting for me there at the hospital, and we just used that as a stopping point. Elaine broke up the distance at that point, and she ran 2 miles, a segment, and then I picked up from there and finished by running into Arcade, which is where we had a late breakfast. And that ended the day there. Day 5, which was Friday the 29th, I got ready, and it was overcast and hazy, and it was drizzling. I started about 6:35. Oh, the hills! And my right leg was really beginning to get sore. And Elaine showed up about 9 o'clock, and because of the soreness of my leg, we decided to call it a day then. So we stopped early there, but at least we got through the hills, outside of Arcade. Day 6, I went up and I talked with the coach there at Silver Creek, and he said that I should take the day off, which I did, and tried to relax and so forth. But it just didn't seem to be that this was going to help much. But Elaine and I started again the following day. And I started out walking, and I got in about 3 miles, and then she finished off the walk, and we had gotten almost within about 5 miles of Letchworth State Park, and we tried to complete that, and I did some of the miles and she did some of them there, but it looked like the possibility that this wouldn't be able to continue, but I thought maybe if I rested for a while that I would be able to complete it, maybe with some rest and so forth. And all that we did that day was to get up and have breakfast with our friends Bob and Jane Pascal. He was our pastor at Sheridan there, and he didn't live too far away from where we were, so we thought we would take off from there. We felt as though we weren't ready to really do any walking or running once we got out there, so we let that go. The following day, the leg was still sore, and we took that day off also. On Wednesday, day 8, we had contacted Bill Plotz, who had a bike shop in Dunkirk, And Elaine had called him because his wife had been her assistant there in Gowanda where she taught. And he suggested, well, what about biking? And I said, well, I wanted to run or walk. He said, well, it doesn't look like this is going to happen. So he says, why don't you try this? And of course, I'd ridden bikes before, but I hadn't really, been biking for too much at this point in time. So I said, okay. And what comes out of this is that he lent us an $800 road bike and showed me how to take care of everything. And I worked on this for a couple of days. And it was kind of, I guess I would have to say, a crazy thing. But that night we watched the movie Dead Man Walking as such. And I thought, well, I'm not dead, but I'm still alive and I can ride a bike. So we left that as day 8. Still not really getting too far. Okay, day 9, we're still soaking the leg. Day 10, icing it, soaking it. Up about 7, watched Diana's funeral. Left Pasco's, our friends there. And started at Nunda Hill. And let's see, I started at 8:25 to Cohocton by 10:15. On to Bath. Found the house that we were staying at that night. It was called the Failings. That was their name. And then Telegraph Hill and so forth. Relaxed, then supper. I rode to Odessa and did the hill that night after supper, so I wouldn't have to get up in the morning and do that. Took that out. Left there about 7. Started at 8:55, went east to Watkins Glen by 10:25. Got on to Route 13 to Ithaca. Arrived in Ithaca about 1:30. Side trip on the way to a covered bridge. There was a nice covered bridge that Elaine had seen there. So she said, so we did this all along the way, but there were certain places we would take, time out and go and do these things. We figured we might as well. Okay, day 12, up about 7, called Dan Palmer and Dennis Webster, D. Webster. And I drove to Bethel Grove and started the day's trek to Whitney Point by 11:30. And all I got in here is hills, hills, hills. And then Elaine went to antique stores. And then I went to Coventry and Sydney. Talked with Patsy again. Media tomorrow morning in Sydney. Stayed in Coventry at Ava Douglas's house. And she was connected with the Ark there in that area. Day 13, said goodbye to the Douglases, called Dennis and Dan again, to Sydney by 9:15. Reporter took our picture. That's the one where we were standing with the bike. A beautiful fall day, driving along, the river, and the leaves were falling. Wood smoke in the air, brisk wind, acorns falling all over the place. Stopped at the Unadilla Diner, called Patsy, then on to Oneonta. This is where Elaine took her wrong turn. Went to the place along the road. They were having their sale and everything, and all of a sudden I haven't got my control vehicle going through. to Oneonta by 12:15. Stopped at noon at a park for a picnic lunch. Called Manny to Otsego, ARC. Met Manny, Joe, and Jerry. Took pictures. Back on the bike for 7 more miles to Davenport Center to hotel. Checked in, changed, relaxed. Denise interviewed us. To dinner with Manny, Pat, back to the room. Called Gene and Don and Diane. Watched TV to bed. I mean, it's crazy. Mm-hmm. Up about 7, continental breakfast, back to the room to relax with the news. Called John, Dan, talked with Patsy. Next talked with George Seuss. Set for Sunday night. Manny checked us out. Took us to the Voc Training Center. Met with Gene, Melissa, Kathy, and Carrie. Very caring staff. Impressive. Okay, day 15. Up about 6:50. Loaded car, breakfast, said goodbye. Danny, Diane, on our way. Outside Windham, 40 miles to Prattsville. Rode from the top of the hills to Stanford to Davenport. Into Oneonta. Lunch at Christopher's. On to Stanford. I think I was just picking up some miles in between there that we had stopped and said we would have to do later just because we had to get to the birthday party. Okay, day 16. Up about 7:30, showered, dressed, down to Peachtree for breakfast. Wow, great breakfast. Checked out. Elaine picked up items for lunch. Out of town to the top of Stanford Hill. Rode down through town, out of the roadside area where consumers from Delaware ARC, what a wonderful bunch, they had the little buttons that said, "Attitude is the only real disability." Mm-hmm. And I mean that, I've used that so many times. The mayor and the deputy mayor of Stanford were there. Terrific view. You can see 5 states from here. Drove to Catskill, Athens, everything closed. Finally got some ice cream, that was our supper. Bought pizza, brought pizza back to the room. Watched news, relaxed, so forth. Day 17, up about 7. Beautiful morning. 18.5 miles in 1 hour and 10 minutes. That was coming down, I think, into Catskill. Drove to Kingston, rode to Catskill, ran over the RVW bridge. I didn't want to bike because it's so narrow on the side, and I was able to jog it. I didn't run it, but I jogged across the bridge there. So I felt as though coming up towards the end of I would be able to run the last 4 or 5 miles into the end there. Drove across the Hudson on 23 to Melonville. Found the high school and ARC. Back to Route 23. Found a motel on Route 23 in Craigsville. Okay. Next day, on the bike on Route 23, we drove out and had to the diner for breakfast. Excellent. On the bike by 9:10, rode to Hillsville, appropriately named. Okay. Then on to the Mass line. Yeah, that's where we ended, was at Hillsville. And there was, these things are crazy, but when we got into Massachusetts, where the sign was, we had to go in, I don't know how many yards. As we were going in, there was a little sign there. It wasn't Laurel Road, it was Laurel something when we finished. So I had actually finished, the day before, but they were having the festivities in Mellonville. And after that, we went to the St. Charles Hotel in Hudson. Now here is something that's weird too. After we had done that, we were driving around over there, and we stopped at the Day Treatment Center in Mellonville, the Early Childhood Center, then on to Olana, which was a beautiful home that was set up on the banks there of the Hudson. It was just gorgeous. And Hudson, of course, is the name of the town on the Hudson. And then we drove out to the Hotelings, Farmers Market, Hotalings. We went by it. Head back to game, relaxed, TV, red nap, called the kids. Okay, this is day 18 or 19. To Hudson. Up about 7, routine breakfast. Drove to Kinderhook, looked around to Martin Van Buren's home. Now get this, Fran Martine Smith, our guide. Outstanding, very interesting tour. Watch short video. Tried to find lunch, stopped at the Chatham Bakery and Deli store. Paul and Laurel arrived. Paul brought Laurel from Chautauqua County, drove her out, and he wasn't sure, what's it going to be like. He had to stop, stop at the to fill up with gas and take a break. Laurel walked in. Laurel, I can do it, no problem. She went in, came back out, and so forth. He just couldn't believe how independent she was.
Sure.
And she was having a ball anyhow. So we met up with Laurel. 408 miles. Final day is day 19. Gorgeous day, warm. Up about 7, down to load van. Got Paul to breakfast, walked around the hotel. In the parking lot with Donna and Diane arrived. Up to the room, left about 10:45. Elaine dropped me at the 3rd Ward to PHC Complex, an adult consumers, Patsy there and Sue Brandt. Police very helpful, escort through town, saw staff at the top of Warren Street, Prospect Street, and Early Learning Center. I was on the bike and Laurel got out of the van. Elaine was driving the van, and we got pictures of her, shaking hands with everybody along. She got out, was over there, and I was, picture me in the background. I got it up there in the bedroom. Met Donnie, Elaine, Diane. Don and I ran to school, saw Steve and Kay, Neri on the way. Then Elaine and Karen. Went on to meet everyone down the road. Reporter stopped by Donnie and me. Donna, Paul, Steve, Kay, Elaine finished about 1 o'clock. Nice reception. Tour from Dina Carroll. Gifts from COARC. That's Columbia ARC. And that was it. That was the end, finally. You know, with all of the roadblocks, so to speak, of that we had to get around and get through, not construction at all, but just the leg itself, but then being able to get the bike and do things, you know, with the bike that would have been impossible to, you know, I think to finish on time and so forth. And we did meet, you know, we did finish when we were supposed to, and it was just a feeling of unity. And by sharing and seeing what the other counties were doing with the resource center and, you know, what we had been doing, I think it was very, very uplifting. And the people were so kind, and they were just, you know, they opened their homes to us, the people that interviewed us. I know the one gal that interviewed Elaine and I that one time in the motel. She came up about 6 o'clock and she knocked on the door, and she came in, and it was Elaine and I and Laurel. And she kind of looks in, and we introduced ourselves and so forth, and explained how things were going and what had happened so far. And when she finished, she said, "You know, I have to tell you, I expected to see a 59, 60-year-old man up here, and you and your wife do not show your age." And I said, "Well, I think we do in many ways, but we've always been, you know, involved with our daughter and with the programs that she's been in and so forth, and they're very near and dear to us." So I think the feeling that she had, I hoped, was the feeling that everybody else shared. And I mean, we saw it from the people that we met also. It wasn't just us, it was just everybody who really had a concern. And I think it was very uplifting for, you know, the celebration that 2 years later took place, that became statewide, and Laurel Run was the main event, or the Laurel Run that was made up of 8 relays. That was the main event that they had, and they touched every county in New York State, and they'd never had anything like that before.